One. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's DC Buzz shooting vertical video. Shoot once, use everywhere. I'm going to stop the share so that I can introduce myself. For those that may not know me, I am Michael Hanley. I am the course director for Project and Portfolio 2. But tonight's main host is Professor Randy Baker from Composition and Visual Design, who I'm going to hand the floor over to and talk about what's going on tonight. So, sir, what are we up to tonight?
Let's see if you can see me now. Or am I up on your
You're
Orville?
on the meeting. I can see you.
Okay, great. So, yeah, tonight we're going to be talking about vertical media and vertical video and where that is right now and why it's so important that you start paying attention to this right now and learn how to do it. It's the future. A big part of our industry is going to go this direction. So, this is something that everybody needs to be doing, and I think you'll be pretty excited about it, whether or not you're a content creator or a filmmaker.
Okay, so let's see. I had my cheat sheet here. So what do we? Let's see. We need to talk about vertical video. Okay, so let me ask you a question on here. As a digital cinematography student, what do they need to know about vertical video, and why do they need to know it?
Well, let me find my Zoom thing, which just disappeared. I had this problem last night when I was on a Zoom as well. My share window just kept disappearing on me.
Zoom
Uh,
did an update. Yeah.
yeah, no, it would I would be watching the screen and I would see it appear and disappear. It was kind of the weirdest thing. So let me see if I can get back into Zoom share. Here's Workplace. Um,
Well, we're seeing it, so it must be your monitor is
yeah,
not seeing
well,
it.
you're seeing what?
I'm seeing your I'm seeing your PowerPoint. I'm seeing the full
And the
PowerPoint.
multi-format. Okay, great. That's what I was trying to get up for some reason. So, yeah. So, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the history of vertical video. I was telling somebody the other day that I've been through this before. When we went from 4:3 to 16:9 in the 70s, all the clients that I shot for wanted to shoot 16:9, but they wanted us to protect for 4:3, which was a pain in the butt. And it's kind of the same thing that's going on right now. So, and it really has happened over about the last 6 to 7 years is what happened. Um, from about 19, for the last 100 years till about 1920, it was, we were shooting 16:9 in film, 1.331 or 1.851 for American Academy, and then television was 4:3, and then we went 16:9. So we were shooting for a wider screen, and X-axis screen, if you will. That's what we're going to be talking about, X and Y axis. And so that happened for 100 years. Today, it's a totally different ball game. Okay, most of the big clients that I work for want me to shoot in 16:9, but they also want me to be able to frame it and protect the framing for social media, which is 9:16 or 1:1 or 4:5, depending on where you're going. And we'll talk about what the formats are and what other what the social media content people are requiring on this, but it's a different thing. So now you have to shoot, you know, 16:9, but you got to be able to deliver across multiple platforms. And this is just the beginning. It's only going to get heavier and heavier people requesting this. So it's a habit that you're going to have to build. Um, it used to be that, do you want us to shoot 60 by 9? Now it's not. That's not even a question anymore. Everybody wants that. So, and it's driven by a lot of different things. Okay. The device dominant smartphones are now in everybody's hand. Everybody has a smartphone. Um, Behavioral shift, younger, especially, the new generations that are coming up, they're used to getting their media on their phone. And then, of course, all the algorithms of the social media, doing, drawing you back and feeding you stuff you want to see, and it's all short. And of course, micro dramas. We'll talk about that in a second, how they're doing the same thing. And then it's, you know, be going out and shooting vertical media is much, less costly than actually shooting, high-end productions. And I tell the story all the time. I was doing a a social media event for it was the opening of one of the Disney new parts of the park. And we were out there, and they usually hire, like, a ton of, camera guys to come in and shoot, and they invite people from around the world to come in, news people around the world to come in, and they stand in front of, we have multiple stations set up, and they stand in front of there. They give us their disc. We, record them doing their stand up live, and it's shipped out, and then we give them the disc, and they take it back into post and edit it. So we were getting ready for this grand opening, and there were only like three camera guys there, and I was talking to the other two camera guys, and I was saying, "Oh, I've never seen anything like this." And about 5 minutes before the event started, they opened up a gate and they let in about 250 social media content creators who all came and stood in front of our cameras, and so they all had their, selfie sticks and the phones and stuff like that. But literally, there were about 250 of them. And, it was just a whole different ball game for the theme parks to go. We can reach more people on social media than we can, through the local news stations that we used to, invite down here. So it's changed tremendously. And it allows you to go out. Everybody has a cell phone in their pocket. So it allows you to go out and create social media. And the more you're going to learn about macro dramas and micro dramas, the more excited you're going to get about this. But this is all what is driving it. And it's slowly been going on since the pandemic. The pandemic really started, but this is what they're looking for now. You're giving them multiple different end products, as opposed to before we were talking about, if you're shooting a feature film, you were doing a
Randy,
trade.
sorry to interrupt, but are we supposed to be seeing just your slides, or are we seeing, because I'm seeing the whole PowerPoint program?
Oh yeah, let me just do this, and so that'll better. I like having. I'm one of those people who like having the things up over here at the
Okay,
side.
yeah, now that you did that, you can see the stuff a lot easier. That's why I was making
Sure.
sure.
Sorry.
I wanted to
Yeah,
make sure
thanks.
everybody could see it. Sorry for
Thanks for
interrupting, but that looks a lot better on the screen now.
Yeah, so now what we're talking about is multiple deliveries. We're just, we're delivering all kinds of stuff. And so from a production company standpoint, that's great for you because it means a lot more post-production, which means more money in your pocket. Okay. But you have to really be thinking about this. It's not as easy as it seems. For example, we were talking if I used to do a couple feature films, and I worked on trailers for feature films, and I've actually done a lot of, marketing stuff recently for feature films that were all really for TikTok and Instagram. So that was it. Today, that was just a couple years ago. Today, it's just like, they want everything. They want 1 by 1 and 4 by 5 and 16 by 9 and 9 by 16, and so it's used across multiple different, content distribution avenues. This is what I should say, distribution avenues. So it's out there, and so it's just something that is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And here is what, you know if you're old like me, and this was back. Quibi was what, 2020. Quibi was a social media network that started, that specialized in 9 by 16 videos. They had some problems. Okay, they first of all, it cost to join, and the videos were like, 5 minutes long. They weren't short videos, and it lasted. They had this initial public offering and raised a ton of money, and it lasted 6 months before they died. At the same time, okay, and Quibi wasn't wrong. They were just a little ahead of the game. At the same time, what was going on was this thing called vertical dramas. Okay, and it started in China in about 2020. And last year, I think they did $7 billion. We do 47 billion for the feature film industry, so it's not even close to what we're looking at in terms of feature film. But this year they say it's, by 2030, they say it will be a $30 billion industry for them. And $7 billion is not a lot. They're estimating between 10 and 14. You see a lot of people talking about 14 billion. That's not going to happen, but it's going to be closer to $10 billion. So it's a very viable thing. And you're going to see a tremendous amount of this continue to grow. And so we'll talk about what these are. I'm going to play a little video for you here so that you can kind of understand what these are. And I'm this is a great video, and I'll put the link for you up in the chat room. But I'm gonna play a part of it because it's a 45-minute
I think
video.
Quick
But
is a really
but this
fair
is a producer.
comparison.
Let me back him
Basically,
up a little bit. Um,
native TikTok basically on its own streaming service for different platforms. So it's a full length feature film cut
Come on,
into
hold
anywhere
on.
between
Let me
60.
hold on one
The
second.
man living in Jennifer Lopez's childhood home has no
Okay, sorry. It's jumping me into commercials here. Let's get rid of this. Okay, let me.
idea who she is.
So you're gonna see this. What's not sure. Hold on. Let me get this queued up for you. Um, I had it on pause a little bit too long, I think. So that's why it's kind of screwing up. But you're gonna see this guy talking about, and this guy is a young producer. Well, look how young this guy is. He's incredibly young to be a producer, doing this much work. So let's pull this up full frame here, and let me play
It's
this.
a really fair comparison. Basically, what
What
we're
they were
doing here
talking about,
is
by the way, was Quibi.
People
Uh,
could probably think, okay, it's just a soap opera for TikTok. You see headlines like that, but I think there's actually more to like the dynamics of how you write these, how they come together, and what makes them different than, maybe historically, like what Quibi was making years ago.
Yeah, and I think Quick is a really fair comparison. Basically, what we're doing here is we affectionately call them vertical soaps, V soaps, or just verticals. But what it is it's narrative TikTok basically on its own streaming service for different platforms. So it's a full length feature film cut into anywhere between 60 and 90 episodes. To make an episodic series of vertical TV. Now, each episode runs, about 90 seconds a piece. So as you're scrolling through each series, you end up consuming about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours worth of content, enough for a feature film. And you're doing it in like a really I think a really progressive, digestible way that people are consuming media nowadays. So as we go up about shooting these things and like the production side of things, it's a really condensed schedule. We'll shoot 100 pages, 120 pages in 8, 9, 10 days sometimes. So we're taking these, feature length films that take, usually filmmakers months to make in, the course of a little over a week. So right now, as I mentioned, I'm currently in Istanbul doing two back to back. And what I've recognized is it is kind of the best game in town, in every town across the globe right now. It is a new niche phenomenon that's really kind of taken precedent in the forefront of a lot of like filmmakers' careers right now.
And so from
And that's what I wanted you to understand. This is in the forefront of a lot of serious filmmakers because of the amount of money that's involved we're talking about here. So you got to be thinking about that. And that's all just at the very beginning. This is all happening. Bob and Michael and those guys will tell you. I've been talking about micro dramas for a little over a year now, going, hey, they're coming, they're getting ready here, they're getting here. So, but producing both for social media and for things like original content like microdramas takes a lot of understanding about. It's a little bit different from shooting like you're normally shooting, both in how you frame and how you compose and how you guide the eye in the frame. So there's a lot of different things that you need to know now, and so we're going to talk about both of those things. We're going to talk about shooting 16 by 9 and then delivering 9 by 16 and 1 by 1 and 4 by 5, and some other aspect ratios. But we're also going to be talking about the action, what's going to happen for filmmakers. Because I work when we go through a lot of people here that they want to do films and they start out by doing short films. You can't make money doing short films. I've said this to people. It's hard enough to make money doing like feature films. This is a whole nother ball game. Okay. This is a whole nother ball game. This is like the gold rush for young filmmakers. And I want to show you this. And we just did a mockumentary um uh feature pilot here with in the master's program that a bunch of students worked on. So this, if you go on Full Sail One, and you can see this article, and they shot it 16 by 9, and then they're going to post um 9 by 16. They're going to go in and crop. They shot 4K, and they're going to go in and crop. And this was Tyrell Schaffner, who is one of the new instructors with the master's program here at the film program from UCLA. She brought this down with her, and she brought in a couple for keys. But you can see pretty much the entire student population. The entire film was shot with students, and so they shot it over a 3-day period. And so this is the type of stuff that you're going to be getting more and more in. And so let's jump ahead. And again, you got to start understanding how this is a different grammar. We talk about the grammar of film, and this is what we're talking about. Widescreen 16 by 9, you're talking about the x-axis. You're going, across the horizontal aspect of it. When you're shooting 9 by 16, now you've got to start thinking more about depth and layering and the z-axis going forward and backwards. So it's kind of exciting when you do that, but there's some other things to think about. And so it's not just in production that you need to think about it. It goes across the entire production ecosystem, including post-production and how you about doing this. He talked about how these micro dramas were 60 to 90 seconds. Each one is a cliffhanger, okay, if you can imagine that. And so the way they do this, and the way why it's becoming so popular, is that they let you watch about the first 10 of them for free. And then after that, they start charging you to watch the rest of them. By about 10, you kind of get hooked into the story, because there's a lot of, it's like an adult, soap opera. And there's, it's all this, they've got supporting, theme things, and it's all over. But what you have to realize is like anything, this is at the very beginning. And so it's going to jump this drama um, vertical market. Okay. We're already seeing it going into children's programming and music videos. And, so you're going to see it go across a much broader vertical market down the road here than just dramas or, shooting social media content for things like, PR and marketing.
So
Um,
Randy,
yeah.
question on that one for you, for the students. You said basically the first 10 are free on that one. So that's the
Most
people
of
are
the
not paying for
platforms.
them, but the filmmakers are still monetizing their channel. So they're still making money.
Well, it's
That's
again,
what I'm
this
asking.
this is the for vertical dramas, the way that these are set up is that a studio is hiring these people to go produce these. And these are online micro drama studios that are doing this. So they're paying for those to be done. It's just like doing a television show. But on the average, a micro drama, he talked about 60 to 100 episodes that are 90 to 60 to 90 seconds each. Okay, so again, it's about the same amount of time as a feature film, but they shoot these with small crews of usually 5 or 6 people. That crew shot you shot of the crew there was unusual. They're usually like a producer, a director, a DP, a gaffer, electric, an audio guy, maybe an A2, a couple PAs. So there's about 10 people on the crew. So they move pretty fast. Okay. It's all done with like cell phones or mirrorless cameras, 16 by 9, 9 by 16. And they cost about $100,000 to produce a series.
Okay,
So,
so
and
these were clients that basically were hiring these people.
these are studios that are hiring these, yeah.
Okay.
And so on the average, it's you're talking about probably $30 million is what one of these would make on the streaming things, and that's again that's what they do is they post them on their streaming network on their macro drama network, and then subscribers sign up for it. And so that's why they're talking about it was a $7 billion, market in China last year. Hollywood's jumping on that boom right now. Universal just added a whole video feature series, and Fox just is doing a whole series with the Ukrainian vertical drama company, and even like all the Spanish networks in Miami and stuff are gearing up for it right now. So we're seeing a big trend in that, but it also affects how you edit. These things are really, if you watch one of these, I encourage you to go out and watch a few of them. I was going to show a couple of them, but most of them are a little racy. So, but you'll see it's like very quick and it ends in no time, and you're just like, what just happened? And so it's very cool to be able to see that stuff happening. And so it changes the way we do production, changes the way we do pre-production. This is where AI is coming into the market, into this whole thing, changes the way we do production, and it changes the way even we do post-production and distribution. But it is, for people who are young filmmakers, man, this is the wild, wild west. This is it. Um,
To
so
let you know, that's how my son convinced me to go on TikTok. Is my 30-year-old son basically said, "Go on TikTok. It's the wild, wild west." He used that term exactly.
yeah, it
So
is.
it's out there.
Yeah, and it's you start combining this with AI, and it's like crazy what's happening. Okay, so this is what the pipeline looks now. It's a vertical platform with millions of viewers, and then Hollywood picks it up, and then so what that's what you're seeing. If you saw the feature, there were like three feature films that started out as these little, micro drama kind of things. One about the room. What was it? I think it was called The Room. So you're seeing that these are people are starting out, and this is a whole new thing right now with that just happened in the last 6 months. They started out producing these micro dramas on these networks, these little online networks. Hollywood saw it and said, "Hey, this is cool. We should do a feature film." So they did a feature film. So it's crazy how all the cycle is changing right now. So that's why I'm so excited for it. Plus, it's going to create all these new industry roles for you, multi-format cinematographers and vertical cinematographers and AI assisted editors, and so if you go online and start looking at new jobs for vertical dramas and vertical media, you'll see a lot of people really kind of asking for people who specialize in this. So the quicker you get up to speed on that, that's what it's. So I just wanted to share this with you real fast because this is kind of interesting. Right now, here's what's going on. Vertical video becomes a mandatory deliverable in all commercial entertainment sets. Pretty much that's what's going on right now. Everybody wants it, period. Um, Microdramas scale into high budget premium entertainment. They jump across the drama vertical market, and they go into comedies and children's programming and all kinds of stuff. You're already seeing news stations do that online as well. And again, with all the podcasts and stuff out there, most of them are going 9 by 16 now. And then it's gonna go, AI is gonna jump into this, and you're gonna see like just mass amounts of this stuff being produced in the next 5 to 10 years. And so it's going to drive it more and more and more and more. And eventually you'll start to see, 16 by 9 and movie theaters and stuff become more specialized. And the majority of, people throughout the world is gonna are beginning their entertainment in these, vertical kind of things. So that's kind of a look at what's going on. Here, I typed this in here because I wanted you guys to understand this. The most successful cinematographers will seamlessly design shoots that serve both cinematic widescreen storytelling and engaging vertical experience simultaneously, treating neither as an afterthought. And that's what we did with 9 by 16 before. So right now, the best thing I can tell you is that this is just another way of producing content. You still have to know the craft of visual storytelling. The craft of visual storytelling is what is going to tie all of this together. This is just another tool that you're doing it with. Okay, so I'm going to pause. Anybody has any questions? A lot of information. So, Mike, what about you? Got a
Yeah, I'm
next
looking to
question?
see on here. Microdramas are definitely the product testing of film. Product testing is interesting because that leads me into a question on something that you mentioned that I kind of tried to lead you a little bit on, but I wanted to really, I think I need to focus on it a little more. Clients. Our students are probably going to be hired when they get out of school for their work as they're trying to find their way. So are these clients asking for microdramas or are they asking for
Well,
specific
again,
ratios,
we're talking about
aspect ratios?
two different types of clients going on here. One is more everyday production clients that you would have, whether you're being doing commercials or PR or marketing material or even television shows. Like when I was doing series, every series that I worked on, the network would send down a crew for a week, and then also as part of our deliverables, we had to deliver vertical media for social media, and we had a still photographer on staff who did nothing but shoot stills and vertical media for social media. And then, on the later ones I did, we actually had a social media person come down and spend some time with us doing social media content specifically for the television show. So you've got that client in itself. Those are, last big shoot I did at Universal. That's what they required, that I did 16 by 9. I shot everything in 16 by 9, but they wanted me to protect for 9 by 16. They didn't care that much about 1 by 1, but I had my grids up anyway, and I protected for by 1 by 1. And we'll show you what the grids are and how to set them up on the FX6 here.
So it was the client that basically came to you and said, we want this in the aspect ratio? Or did
Well,
they say they wanted it for a particular
It's
format, a
it's
particular
deliverables.
platform?
Here's the deliverables we want. So that's what they're
Okay.
asking. The deliverables aren't just like, hey, shoot this and then give me the chip, or give me the hard drive with the footage on it. They're like, we want you to shoot this for 16 by 9, but we also want to use it for 9 by 16. So that what that means is usually you got a frame for that. And then you got to shoot, at least the minimum of 4K UHD, so that's the big difference. Let's see if we have any questions in here. Again, my thing just appears and disappears randomly.
Yeah, I've been noticing that I have to click on chat to open it back up in order to see some
So,
stuff.
Shay was asking, is this going to be part of the new curriculum here at Full Sail? I think you'll find that everybody's kind of incorporating this in. Okay. And then Annette was saying that I can't reconcile myself to using AI. Okay. Here's the thing, Annette, you got to realize. With age comes a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom. Not so much knowledge, more wisdom, I would say. But I've been through this multiple times. I started on film. I started shooting film, and when video came in, everybody said, video's gonna ruin, filmmaking forever. And of course it didn't. Okay. And then, I went through it with like Photoshop. When Photoshop was introduced, everybody said, oh my God, graphic design will never be the same. And then I went through it when they went through from linear to non-linear editors, and then everybody said, oh, it will never be the same. Even Spielberg and, those guys were like, I'm gonna stay editing on Steinbeck's, which was archaic at the time.
It's
And then
Steenbeck, not
Steinbeck.
Steinbeck. Steinbecks are
Feedback.
writers. Steenbecks
Yeah.
are a beautiful
Okay. Let me go
machine.
back to mine. Moviola. Okay.
Oh, I used to own a moviola.
Yeah, I have a part of a moviola. And we saw it with HD video, and digital cinematography, and so we see it even when the zoom in the '60s when the lens was introduced. Everybody thought a zoom lens, that's gonna ruin cinema forever. So what you have to approach AI as is a tool, just like using Premiere Pro, which is now just Premiere. I understand they changed the name, and or anything else, any of the new tools that are out there that come up with. It's just a tool. You AI on itself is not going to create things. It's a symbiotic relationship with humans. It's got to be. It's 50/50 because so where should you start? Go to a website called curiousrefuge.com. Curiousrefuge.com. Everything you want to know about doing AI filmmaking, you can find there. Um, with 69 being added with the short reel series, and the dynamic of the DC world also changed within
Actually,
the.
you jumped over one, Randy.
Okay.
I want to make sure we don't skip anybody. Because Kayla's asking about if they need to focus more on vertical shots in our portfolio. And I think that's part of the objective of tonight is to
Right.
talk about the fact that they should still be focusing on 16 by 9, but be aware of the 9 by 16.
Again, look at the ultimate goal here. That's exactly why I put this in here, is that Again, you need to, it's just another thing that you need to be thinking about. But you, again, you need to design, your productions to seamlessly serve both cinematic widescreen storytelling and engaging vertical experiences, both at the same time. And so that's just a whole nother level of things that you guys have to learn how to do. That, and again, we had to do that back in the 70s when we changed from 16 4:3 to 16 by 9, and so eventually you'll see it become more and more, what's going to happen is all the kids that are growing up right now in middle schools and high schools are going to do this automatically. They're going to do this automatically. You have to kind of wrap your head around that. So yeah, should we focus more on vertical shots in our portfolios? I would have a combination of vertical shots. And like I was telling you, and that if you go to curiousrefuge.com, there's a job board in there. Okay, look at the job board, and then say that you don't think AI, you shouldn't be using AI. You'll see that there's hundreds and hundreds of AI jobs for AI producers, AIographers, or what they're called instead of cinematographers. AI content creators. So that's it. Content for creating for small businesses. This is really where this is stuff is going to shine in small business. EV tend to, and specifically shoot vertical on content because um, that's what I'm interested in this because I'm going to show you something here. And again, it's another trend that's affecting equipment. Okay. I'm going to show you a tripod by Manfrotto that they came out with called the 500X, and it shoots, uh, 16 by 9 horizontally, but the base plate flips up at 90 degrees. So it's got a built-in 90-degree, the base plate on there, so you can shoot 16 by 9, just like the old L plates. If you're used to photography, there was an L plate that you could put on your still camera, and you just take it off and click it back on the side on the tripod. You can shoot portrait and landscape both. It's the same thing. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. So we'll talk about that. I do a lot of content creating. Yep. So
Randy, I'm going to do a minor self plug to give
yeah,
an example on something for if they want to go back and look after your stuff. Last month when I did the buzz, I used the trailer from the new this season of Strange New Worlds and basically put side by side. Here was the 16 by 9, and here's where they targeted the 9 by 16. So that
yeah.
might help out them a little bit also after this is done.
Well, we'll go through that here right now. And so I just want to go through quickly some of the you may not understand a lot about aspect ratios. It can be a little confusing, especially if you don't do a lot of content creation for social media. So let's talk about this. And this is just the base, So I'm gonna put up in here, I'm gonna throw up a file.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe we should take some questions towards the end
yeah.
because you've got a lot of stuff. But handheld and gimbals, that's going to be something we're probably going to maybe
Yeah,
not touch
that's
on because that's not part of the framing.
we'll talk a little bit about those, by the way. But what you're going to see is that it all, you'll see. I'll talk about that. So yeah, hang on. We got a lot of stuff to go through, so I'm trying to get through. Let's see here. I'm looking for oh, in the wrong place. I'm gonna upload for you a more article that I wrote. This is kind of a visual slide deck, but I'm gonna upload an article on different aspect ratios for the different social media things, which is a little bit more comprehensive. So you can also look at that as well. It's called the social media video charts. Here we go. I just uploaded that. So yeah, so you can see there's all kinds of different aspect ratios. An aspect ratio, by the way, just so in case I'm not going to assume everybody knows, it's the length and the horizontal and vertical horizontal and the width of the frame. So, you're talking here 9 by, well, here's 9 by 16, 16 by 9. Okay. That's what it's talking about. 9 by 16. That's it. Standard feed 1 by 1. And you can see X and, lots of different, Facebook has a 1 by 1. But you see a lot of these have multiple things. Instagram will do 191 by 1, which is kind of really weird for different things. But if you look at the article, I break that down for you. Um, And then YouTube has like three or four different things. Instagram has like five or six different, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing reels or stories on Instagram, it all changes. If you're shooting 9:16, you got to be aware of if you do the Instagram feed, it automatically crops that to 4:5. So you see a lot of weird people with like their heads cut off and their mouth cut off because they think they've got it framed for 9:16, but they cut it off. So we'll talk about all that. Here's the main ones you need to know. Okay, 16:9 horizontal long form video, full screen mobile, 9:16 vertical feed posts. This is like Instagram cropping that down for feed posts. If you don't, these are people who are doing feeds, live feeds and stuff. And then flexible multi-purpose 1:1, which a lot of people are shooting these days. And then if you're doing anything for Pinterest, they're a little weird. They do 2:3. So, this is what we're talking about. Here's what you got to understand about this. And again, you're shooting at least high def, preferably 4K on this. This is, 16:9. If you were to crop this in 9:16, this is what it looks like. Okay. So, is that great framing and composition? Yeah, would you have the car in the middle? We'll talk about all of that here just in a few minutes here. And then here's 4:5. This is the optimized Instagram feed for that. And then here's a 1:1 and a 2:3, which is the Pinterest stuff that if you're going up on Pinterest. And here's just the ecosystem matrix that you can have. I have a PDF of this entire, 85 slide deck slides on here that I'll upload here in a second. But here's what we're trying to do here. And this is what this is all about. You shoot once and you deliver everywhere. Now, there's a couple different ways to do that. Okay. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Protecting 9:16 in 16:9. You can do it in camera. You can shoot 16:9 and you can protect what you're shooting inside. Or you can shoot two different cameras, one 9:16 and one 16:9. But even even the 9:16, you're probably going to want to crop, yeah, and have make sure you can do 1:1 out of the 16:9, and then you have a 9:16 by itself. So it's a little different how you do these, and there's a couple different ways of doing this. But this is what we're going to be talking about. And here you can see a 16:9, and you can see a 9:16, and you can see a 1:1. Now, 1:1 can grow and expand, and it fills up top to bottom usually, and the same thing for the 16:9 on that when you're talking about aspect ratios on here. And we'll take a look at this. And so this is what we're looking at. Okay, so this is what we mean by being, purposeful about, when you're framing. So this is asymmetrically framed person in the middle of the frame. Here's the 1:1 protected. Here's the 9:16. All three of those work, right? So that's what you need to really kind of get under your belt here is how to frame these. And it changes the way we frame things. Okay. And so it changes things like headroom and lead room when we're talking about composition. So you have to be aware of that. And so a couple things you need to do as you're preparing to shoot this stuff. First of all, you got to identify what's non-negotiable. What in your frame do you actually have to have in the frame? That's pretty simple, right? If you're shooting a person, probably have to have that person in the frame. You don't want to cut off their head, or you don't want to cut them off too much of the side of their head and stuff. And then lock the 9:16 first. So set up the shot. So if you've got the grids up in your viewfinder, you can see 9:16, and that's pretty safe. And then check the 1:1 breath. Make sure that, if they're going 1:1, you don't have some weird framing going on in there, like tangents and things. And then look at your overall 16:9 and see if you can kind of everything makes sense and the composition looks good on that. That's how you kind of approach this. You start in and you work your way out. Okay, you don't start out and work your way in. Okay, that's important to know. So, and then things like lead room and video. In video, the general rule is you want 2/3 of the room in front of, the person and 1/3 behind. So lead room is known as many things. It's also called nose room or looking room or walking room or anticipatory space, or it's actually known as the law of space. And so what it basically means is that when you're generally shooting on an x-axis horizontal frame, you want 2/3 more room in front, 1/3 behind. And when you do that, it looks organically more natural to people. It doesn't look, it's not like they're right up against the frame. If you're Mr. span, that's what they used to do. They used to put him looking, his face would be right here instead of over here. But when you're doing 9 by 16, that's totally different. And so, you don't have that much lead room. Here's the lead room for 9 by 16. You see that? There's a little bit of lead room here, and you're cutting off the face, but it's more natural. This is how you'd frame that. So it takes a little bit of getting used to it. So they call it a center weighted three-quarter angle. I don't really actually agree with that description of that, but organically you need to get into the habit of kind of understanding what feels good. And it goes against the grain because most of you are being taught to frame like this, and now all of a sudden you got to frame like this. And it's the same thing for headroom. And so what we're talking about is normally when we're building a shot, we're building layers, foreground, midground, background, and you're doing that. And it goes across the x-axis left to right, okay? Now you need to be talking about stacking. If it's 9 by 16, you need somebody in the foreground, something in the midground, something in the background, and the foreground's down low, the midground's in the middle, and the background's up high. So it's called stacking. So it's a little bit different. You don't do that in normal 16 by 9. So, and this is what we're talking about. And then lots of people make this mistake. They think, I'm going to give them all this headroom up there, but you can't do that. You have to frame it. Everything has to work together. So the 16 by 9 and the 9 by 16 and the 1 by 1. So this is how you would frame it. You wouldn't frame it like this, okay, on a medium shot. So this is called headroom from the top of the head to the top of the frame. It's called headroom from the bottom of the feet to the bottom of the frame. It's called bottom room. And so generally speaking, you want what's called notional space. This little space between the head and the top of the frame is called notional. Now, if you're shooting a close-up or extreme close-up, it's okay to cut off a little bit of the head. We call it giving a haircut, not a lobotomy. Okay, you want to cut off a little. And normally, it's all about where's the eyes go. Again, you can see the eyes go. And if you pay attention to this, even if you're doing 9 by 16 and you have the rule of thirds grid up, which makes it a very, very crowded viewfinder, you still want the eyes on a medium shot to go right here. There's an eye box. If you don't know anything about an eye box, you should learn that about composition. So if you, not to be too technical, but if you take the phi grid and you double the bottom of the phi grid on top, and out here it creates a box, and then the size of the shot you have from a wide shot to a close up goes above the box and below the box and in the middle of the box. That's where the eyes usually go. This is a symmetrical framed, and so you're going to see a lot more symmetrical framing. We had one of the first Venices into the school several years ago, and it was brought in by this extremely intelligent guy from Panavision, who I was talking to, and he said we were talking about shooting anamorphic large screen, and he goes, it changes the way you frame because you're usually taught when you're shooting 16 by 9 or 1.351 or one of the feature film aspect ratios that close-ups are used sparingly because of the power of the close-up. You don't want to desensitize the viewer to the power of the close-up. But when you're shooting anamorphic or 9 by 16, it changes. You want to see more close-ups. You have to see more close-ups because of the frame that you're actually shooting. So it changes the way that you're doing these. And so, you have to start thinking about this in terms of a multi-format routine that you need to develop, where you have to shoot things a little bit differently. You have to do extra coverage. There's some weirdness that happens when things start moving within your shot that you need to know about. And then you also need to know how to shoot this. You can do 16 by 9, and then you can frame with the guides inside the FX6, for example, or you can have the FX6 with a dedicated cell phone to the side. We'll show you some mounts for that here in a second. Or you can get a rig and turn the camera actually sideways. So the camera is shooting sideways and you're shooting 9 by 16. So there's pros and cons for each of those. And so whichever one you choose, that's fine. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's whatever works for you. But I just wanted to show you. Here's FX6 is mounted sideways. Okay, these are what it looks like. This is on a tripod rig, and this is called the L mount. And so this is a little overdone for this. The small rig literally makes a mount like this that's that big. And this is what it looks like on a shoulder mount. He's got his monitor in front, so he's shooting, off his shoulder, and he's shooting 9x16. So this is kind of the run and gun rig that you would see on micro dramas. This is more what we would see if somebody was shooting like serious social media where they needed a, 4K social media. Here's some of the rigs you can buy. And so we'll talk about these. This is a small rig. It's usually smaller than Tilta or the two big people. This is so new that these guys are just coming out with this stuff. Okay, this is all brand new stuff that hasn't been out for that long. And there's specific rigs. You got to be careful. And the reason I'm showing you this is because if you don't want to go out there and just buy stuff. You have to really do a little bit of research. Like they sell you this as the they sell this as like I think what do they call it? It's the FX6 vertical shooting kit. Okay, it's $134. You go, oh, that's not bad. Okay, but what you don't realize is that you have to have this cage. It mounts to this cage, so you have to spend $200 extra to get the cage. So you got to be aware of that stuff. Same thing. This is Tiltus. Okay, it's a side mount, and so it's just a little bitty side mount. And again, they sell this little mount for $29, and you think, "Wow, that's pretty cool, $29." But you need this cage to mount it to. Okay, so the
So
cage is
Randy, you're
$29.
basically saying the Jurassic Park thing. You think you should, but you think you could do it. You could buy it, but you didn't stop to think if you should buy it.
Yeah. So that's it. And we'll show you. And I use this a lot. I have a bunch of stuff here on my desk here that I can show you. Um, I have all kinds of rigs. Okay. So these are some of the ones that I use just so you can see. There's a
Hey
lot.
Randy, why don't you stop sharing your screen so that you can see your screen better, and I'll
Yeah.
spotlight you.
Okay. So this is some of the stuff that you should be looking at. Okay. Stop share.
And I'm
Okay.
going to put the spotlight on you so that it can make sure it stays on you.
Okay.
Okay, you are locked in.
So this is one by Ulanzi. This is a little Ulanzi one there. That's there. What I like about this is that it works really well and it changes and you can lock it down. And so it's got lots of different mounting quarter 20 mounting threads on it. It's got cold shoes on the end that you could put things on as well. And so it's pretty rugged. And so you can mount this a lot of different ways. So you would put this on an arm. Let me show you what an arm looks like. Well, here's one. This is called the Israeli arm. And so they look like this. They're just adjustable arms that you can, you put this on the end and you can mount this on the camera and then you can mount it right up at the front alongside the lens. And I'll show you one that I have mounted here. So this is called the Israeli arm. I'll show you the one that I use. It's a spider arm, a crab spider arm. And they've got little devices that you put on there and it just comes right off. And this is another cheap one. This is the Neewer one. I think this is like $15 that just has a hole and you clamp that on and put it on a spider mount. These are a little bit more intense. These you can mount actually on the camera, and these are pretty cool because they close down all the way, they fold down all the way, and they come all the way out. So you can mount this on the hot shoe or the cold shoe of the camera on the top of the camera, and then you can mount it underneath right above the lens. So you have the cell phone right above the lens. Or you can put it off to the side of the camera like this, just turn it like this, put it off to the side of the camera and have it come right down along the side of the lens. So the middle of the cell phone is even with the lens. So this one articulates and you can do all kinds of stuff with it. They make smaller ones if you just want to put on the hot shoe in the front of the camera. You don't have to deal with all that. Again, they turn and do all kinds of stuff on that. And then you can even get a little bit fancier. This is a small rig one that I use. It's got a it's power supply built into it, so it will charge your phone as well. So that's one way of doing it. I have on my FX5 this setup. This is a spider mount, and this is a little more expensive, but it's a safety issue for me about getting these on and off. You have to it's a lever to lock this down so I'm not
As
fighting.
you're getting that off, I just want to let people know that as he's saying the names and showing stuff, this is why you want to do the research because each company has their own name, and there's a lot of knockoff stuff out there that looks
Yeah,
looks
you
looks
can wait.
looks like it's a good price, but it's crap. You have to be careful.
This is an Amazon Israeli arm, okay, and it'll cost you about $25. if you put a monitor on this or anything heavy and you crank that thing down, it's gonna spin all over the place. This is the uh spider crab dolly, and they make different sizes of these. Now the thing I like about these is that they have these airy mount things that you can screw on and off, and then when you're ready to put it on, you just click it in and click it down and it locks in. And then to take it off, it won't come off even if that comes loose. You have to actually push that in to take it off. So you have one of these on the camera and one of these on the cell phone, so that if you are using it, you can pull this whole thing off and shoot normally. So again, these tend to be a little bit more expensive. These are about 100 and some bucks, but this small one's about 75 bucks, but it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, you get what you pay for is basically the
Yeah.
bottom line.
So that's it. And so you want to be careful about when you go out and buy gear. And we'll show some other things. Again, one of the things we want to go before I jump in, and I'm going to show you a couple other things here that would do is it's not just about cropping. We're going to talk next up about how to frame and compose for 9 by 16 and 1 by 1. It's not just about cropping. You got to have intention and purpose. Okay, you got to really be thinking about this up front. It's just not something you can go out and shoot. You got to really put some thought and effort into it. And again, with what I'm talking about here is you got to learn how to build layering. It's one of the hard things that we teach in my classes, layering there's two types of layering. There's something called a near far layer, which is a foreground and a background. And then there's, foreground, midground, background. And of course, you get more depth with the foreground, midground, background. And so you got to learn how to build things up. And I'll show you this. We'll actually show you a video here in a second. And so again, you start from the middle. Oh, I'm not showing my screen, so I'm going through these and not showing you these. You start from the middle. This is where I kind of left off. Uh, Intentionality continuum. And again, learning how to build layering, depth over width. Okay, before you used to, spreading things out. Now it's about stacking things together. And it's much more intimate. Things are much more tighter. You're going to use close-ups a little bit more. Um, you have to use framing devices like frame within a frame, for example. Doorways and stuff become really important. Walls to hide, build foregrounds and stuff. And then you have to be much more intentional about how you block the camera or how you block the talent in the camera, how they move in the camera. It's much more intentional than normal. And then again, learning how to build front to back, depth and stack. And we'll show you what that looks like. It's pretty kind of interesting. And you can see that here. Bottom, middle, top on this. Okay, so before we get into open gate cinematography and I lose everybody, I just want to show you a couple things on this. I'm going to turn a light on so you can see this. And by the way, there are other rigs if you're not aware of some of the other rigs. Here's my vertical rig. Let me stop sharing so you can really get the gist of this. Um, this is my vertical rig. Let me get this set up, back up. Okay. And so this is a Sakudo. Let me crank that down. This has surprised a lot of you probably. May have not have seen this. So you can shoot this 16 by 9 or you can shoot this vertically. Your cell phone goes in here, okay? And I've got a shotgun mic on here. I've got a wireless mic on this side. I got a hard drive on this side. I got a wireless controller that I can focus and start my recording here and focus in and out. It's got a graticule on here. And again, the phone goes here. I can look at the phone through here and touch it if I need to do any touching on it, but I can also use, different things. This is a built-in boom. Okay, so if you're doing interviews and you're shooting people, this will go right out, and you don't need a big microphone. I've tried a bunch of different microphones on this, uh, ended up with this Rhodes because you're so close. You're really in close on those people, so you don't need a really expensive microphone. You can use this, but this is just one of the many rigs that you're going to see that start popping up, specifically designed for shooting vertical media. And it's really kind of interesting when you see these rigs for the first time and somebody using them. It's like something out of a weird show. Let me get out of that and let me go back down to here and let me iris up a little bit so you can see this. And I'm going to bring this up so you can see my see my screen? Okay, here we are. We're down here at the bottom. Let me just pull this up. So let me start sharing again so you can see my screen. So this is what we're looking at. This is the FX6 right now. And so I'm going to just touch on that and get into focus. And then what's my white balance at here? My white balance is at 55, which is pretty good. Okay. And you can see I got a pretty shallow depth of field on there. If I zoom out a little bit, this is what we're looking at. So what we're looking at here, and I'm at 3.4 feet, 3.4 feet. Anybody know who these two characters are? J.J. Abrams, Stephen Colbert, Funko Pops. So if I was framing this for 16 by 9, I would probably have this at about 45 millimeters, 40 millimeters, something like that, somewhere in there. And I would take, JJ and I'd put him over here on the rule of thirds grid, kind of somewhere right in there. And I would take, Stephen and I'd put him over here. And this would be my two shot, right? Well, that doesn't work for 16 by 9. It works for 1 by 1, but it doesn't work for 9 by 16. Okay. So if we're 9 by 16, you have to move these in. You have to be a little bit more intentional. So I would put him here. And then instead of putting Steven right there, I might put Steven back a little bit more, stack him, and I would put him here. You don't want to cut off the eyes, and you don't want tangents where these two things are overlapping in between here, right here. So again, you'd have to stack things. And in the background back there, I would probably put something back here up in this. When I framed, I would compose with something up here. So I'm stacking, and I would probably move AJ forward a little bit, more like that. And I would kind of move Steven a little bit in. So anybody know what that is called when you move things forward and backward in a frame? It's called foreshortening. Okay. So, is my thumb bigger than my head? It's not. But if I move my thumb 2 feet, now my thumb is bigger. So what that means is you can move objects, make them smaller or bigger just by moving the objects forward, backward in the frame slightly. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about framing, being, a little bit more consistent on thinking about your framing and what you're doing. And you can see here, I've got 1 by 1 frame set up in here, and I've got a 9 by 16 frame in here. So let me show you how I did that. And so it's in the slide deck here that we're going to go through. And we'll come back to that, and we'll talk a little bit about Open Gate. So most of the new cameras that are coming out,
Can I give one thing? For
yeah,
those that have not had composition visual design yet, he's using the camera that is currently being distributed to DCBuzz after composition visual design for the second half of the degree. So just wanted to let people know who haven't had your class yet, this is what you're using.
it's an incredible camera. It's just like, an incredible camera. So this doesn't have Open Gate, but most of the cameras coming out, and if you have something like the iPhone 17 even has Open Gate. And so what Open Gate is primarily is that when you're looking at the sensor, let's see if I have a sensor in here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So when you're looking at a sensor, the sensor is taller than it normally is when you see it in 16 by 9. It's actually, 2 by 3 or sometimes 4 by 3. And so what they do for 16 by 9 is they crop off the top and bottom, and they don't use that. Okay, Open Gate uses the entire sensor. So you're recording the entire sensor itself, which gives you a 4 by 3 or a 2 by 3 frame, and then you can reframe that in post. Okay, so it kind of fits in really well with shooting, different aspect ratios. It was made for that, and that's one of the reasons that everybody's pushing this on new cameras right now. Open Gate, sensors. So this is a game changer. And so what you have to realize here is that if you think about it this way, and I thought long and hard about how to frame this, but if you come from if you're a painter or been around a painter, you have the giant canvas, but a lot of times they'll paint beyond the edges of the canvas, and then when they frame it, they cut off what they just want to see. It's kind of like us going into and cropping and zooming in and stuff. So it's the same thing here. You're instead of just doing, part of the canvas, you're shooting, it's part of the frame, you're shooting the entire canvas here. And again, you see you get a little bit more room in there to play around with in post. You can move things and you reposition things. And so again, creates more time in post, but you have much more flexibility in doing that. Um, and this is it. I'm not going to spend any time on this. This is just different. You have to know that when you shoot at different ratios on an open gate, it gives you different resolutions. It gives you different ratios. So not everything is 3:2 or 4:3, or they change a lot. And again, it's all technical stuff you don't know. But here's what you need to be looking at. And again, this is 1:1 here in 16:9. And this is the entire open gate thing that you're looking at. So you can reframe this any way you want. You can frame it wider, but you have some issues here. Okay, you got to be careful about not seeing crew people or boom pulls or lights and stuff. If you're doing that, and so again, it takes a little bit more work when you're shooting to pay attention to those things, thinking about seeing open gate. You got to be looking for that, and when you're in post, have to go back and fix any issues that you have. Same thing we talked about before. Don't have too much excessive headroom, even with open gate. Now that you have much more room at the top, you have to frame intentionally. Okay, you have to frame it just like you want it to look, and then in post that gives them a little bit more flexibility to work around that. So again, it's a different way of thinking about framing. Here's what we're talking about: the spatial shift, and this is really, we're talking about x-axis left to right. Okay. And this is what you would look at. This is how you'd frame a shot like this. One on one side, one on the other. Side by side stage in 9:16 doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So you have to think about how you do that. And again, this is all about blocking and mastering and creating three-dimensional depth. When you create three-dimensional depth, you use these things called depth cues. For a lot of you, if you've never heard about this before, it's probably first time you've ever heard that term, depth cues, CUES. So what we're trying to do when we're shooting, any kind of video or film, it was you're trying to create as much three-dimensional depth in a two-dimensional screen or window, as I like to call it, as possible. You're looking through a window, okay, and you're trying to create as much three-dimensional depth in that two-dimensional window as you can. And to do that, you use these things called depth cues. A thing like having the camera slightly higher than the object that you're shooting, so you can see a little bit over the top of them, so you're not flat onto shooting it. It looks flat. That's a depth cue. Turning the object slightly into the frame instead of having the object flat to the frame, that's a depth cue. Having a strong backlight on the foreground and midground that separates them from each other in the background, that creates depth. That's the depth cue. Having a variation of bright and darkened colors in the background, that's a depth cue. One of the things we used to teach was using the rule of thirds grid. That's the depth cue. When you're shooting 9:16 and 1:1, that kind of goes out the window. So you're still thinking about creating depth, and even more so, but now you're also thinking about top to bottom because you have so much room. Okay, so it's called stacking. You're actually stacking. So you use things more like vertical layering and over the shoulder shots. You'll see in the micro dramas that you're going to watch, they do a lot of over the shoulder shots. Okay, people's heads in the frame and stuff just to create that. So again, you're kind of always looking at the center, 9:16, and making sure that you're framed well in there. And then you go out from that, and it's called the 1:1 safety zone. So the 1:1 would be here and his shoulder. You'd have both of those in, and then the 16:9, you'd have all the other stuff in there as well. Action inside this vertical. This is the primary action area that you need to be thinking about when you're framing this. And again, there's all kinds of different delivery, ratios for this. And each one has, things that it has taken out and compositional consequences that you need to pay attention to. So it's no longer just a matter of knowing simple, basic composition. You got to know composition and how it works for each of these different aspect ratios, which makes it much more difficult, but actually much more exciting for me. Again, philosophy, you're going to hear me say this over and over again tonight. Protect the middle, start from the middle, come back out. Record open gate and then learn how to reframe if you're shooting an open gate. It's a process that you have to work on before you practice and stuff before you actually go out and shoot there. And then sometimes you will find that you can't shoot 16:9 and 9:16 together, and you just have to realize that there are times that that's going to happen. So that's when you would get a second camera and shoot side by side. So those are kind of the things that you need to be paying attention to as you go along. And then once you start moving the camera, it's a whole nother ball game. Okay, so that's a whole workshop on itself, just moving the camera. We have an
Hey,
immersive lab
I,
here for, yeah.
I want to add something in on the open gate that you just referenced on there about how much stuff you have to shoot and everything and keep it open. A lot of people are running into an issue right now of not so much framing for the open gate, but their computers, when they start moving things around, are starting to choke on
Oh
some of
yeah.
their stuff. So the processing power needs to be there as well on the editing platform. So I just
So
wanted to
that
make mention
that's
of
an
that.
important, very important point, Mike. So for most of this stuff, if you're going to shoot multi-format, you're going to be shooting 4K. And there's, the FX6, the camera you're going to get, it's going to shoot HD 1920 by 1080, and it's going to shoot 4K UHD, which is 2160 by 3840, and you're also going to shoot 4K. It can shoot 4K DCI, which is 2160 by 41 something. 4K DCI is 300 megabits a second. Yeah, that's a lot of data that you're going down there. 4K UHD is 200 megabits a second, and HD is about 170. So you really start jumping up there. And then with the new Open Gate, that's going to become a little bit higher. So you're going to need some good computing power to be editing this stuff. And it's really all about the RAM. So down the road, when you start working with clients, one of the first things that I would highly suggest that you do, besides getting hard drives, is really start looking at updating the RAM on your computers. Now, a lot of the new Macs, you can't do that because the RAM is built into the motherboard. So you need to start saving your pennies and looking at buying a much beefier computer if you're going to be doing a lot of editing down the road. Again, here's the trade-off for OpenGate. A lot we just talked about. This is what Mike was just talking about. It's data cost, storage cost. And you know what's going on with the DRAM storage right now, and SDXC cards and CFast cards and hard drives. They're tripling in price over the last 6 months because of the DRAM shortage that's caused by AI companies using them for the AI chips. Um, when you shoot OpenGate, a lot of the newer DSLRs that are doing or mirrorless cameras that are doing OpenGate have problems overheating right now. So that's a big problem for people. You do have some frame rate limitations when you're shooting an OpenGate that you don't have when you're not shooting an OpenGate. And again, there's some issues going on about, it's a little bit harder to focus. The lens compatibility, you got to make sure you have the right lens for that to shoot. And then you got to be careful because you're seeing things in the frame that you normally wouldn't be paying attention to at the top and bottom that you might have to edit out and post, crop out and post. And then there's a much larger labor intensity end of it when you're in post production. So again, it's a multi-format workflow pipeline. You have to be thinking about it in pre-production. You have to use it in production. Be thinking about it when you're shooting in production, and you have to be thinking about it when you're doing post-production. It's not just something that you're going to shoot 9:16. That's not it. Okay, again, and the thing that I'm going to hammer into is about purposefulness and intentionality. Okay, that's what you have how you have to be thinking about this and when you do this. So that's it. And again, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about that horizontal paradigm versus the vertical paradigm now. And again, stacking and layering is what we're talking about here. 16 by 9 lateral breadth versus, 9:16 spatial compression for those of you who are into those types of things. And here's what we're talking about. This is the normal 16 by 9 frame for the x-axis, right? Here's the rule of thirds grid up in there. Okay, here's 9:16, which is slightly, a little bit larger than the inner circles of the rule of thirds. You can't frame like this. You just can't frame a shot like this. So those people have to be moved in. But if you move them in, they're going to be like, on top of each other. So this is more what you're doing now. Okay. So you're stacking. You got a foreground element over the shoulder. You got the midground in the middle of the layer, and then you got a background, and you're stacking these. You see how that works? Okay. It's a little bit different how you look at composition on that. And again, here's a kind of another matrix. I'm a big matrix guy, so I'm always doing matrices. Again, the camera motion. When you're horizontal, you like to see pans, really nice long pans showing the horizon and stuff. When you're doing vertical, you can't do pans. Okay? You can do tilt up and down, or you can do what's called pedal steam up and down, where the camera, the actual tripod and stuff move up and down, but pans are not good. And I was saying we have an immersive lab with a Blackmagic immersive camera, one of the few. You can't tilt or pan on that. You gotta hold it steady. So you have problems with shot types too. I mean, you can't do 2 shots and 3 shots and 4 shots are harder to do. Very easy to do when you're doing X-axis horizontal 16 by 9. Very difficult to do. You're stacking 4 people in a shot to do a 4 shot. That doesn't always look great. And this is what you need to be thinking about, the frame. And so when you're shooting on your phone, you need to be thinking about this primary area right here. And if you've done any social media, you know that a lot of the platforms put closed captioning and all kinds of crap down here at the bottom. So if you're framing and you have important information down here, more than likely that's going to be lost at some point. So again, that's another consideration that you need to be thinking about. Again, this is what we're talking about. You don't want to try to use the rule of thirds grid like you would when you're doing horizontal. This is going to be more about symmetrical center framing than just about anything else that you're doing. Um, Again, you're building depth in there and you're using leading lines to kind of draw the eye. And you see here's a foreground, here's a midground and a background, as opposed to left to right framing that you would normally be used to on this. Um, and vertical long shots. What you're going to find, I don't call them long shots. I call them wide shots, but this is an East Coast thing, long shots. A long shot is a wide shot, which is a head to toe. Okay. And there's, um, uh, very wide shots, which are, about a half the frame. And then there's extreme wide shot, where if you have a person, it's about a third of the frame. And again, you're going to see a different use of shot types in these types of media that you're using. You're going to use more wide shots in your shots. You're going to have more wide shots, and you're going to have more close-ups as well. So it's kind of a little different. And again, this is you can't pan left and right. You can't dolly left or right. You can tilt up and down, and you can pedestal up and down, but you want to stay away from panning. It confuses people. And this is how you would do wide. This is how you do awkward negative, where you're cutting off each. Here you got to stack them. That's all we're saying here again. For a lot of people in post-production, you'll see this in a lot of vertical dramas. If they don't have a good enough shot, what they'll do is they'll actually edit in little shots within it. So there'll be 3 stacked frames within a shot. This is something else that you wouldn't see. Well, it depends on who the director is. Sometimes you would see that, but very rare. But in vertical media, you see that a lot more often. Okay, that's it. And then there's a whole Premiere Pro thing that I'm not going to go too heavy in here, but you just need to realize that you're working with a different canvas. And when you're exporting, there's some, I'll give you a PDF of this entire thing when we leave so that you can understand how to go into Premiere Pro and set up some of the settings in there for being able to, produce 9 by 16. And you don't see this much anymore. This was when they were first starting doing this. You'd see this all the time, where they would take the 9 by 16 and they would just blur instead of cut. They would shoot the 16 by 9, but they would give you 9 by 16 in focus, and the rest of it would be out of focus. Again, you don't see that very much anymore. Pacing changes. Again, when we talked about micro dramas, they're 60 minutes to 90 seconds, 60 seconds to 90 seconds long. Almost every episode is a cliffhanger. Imagine that, okay? And they've got longer takes. So the takes may be up to 15 seconds. Normal take is 3 to 8 seconds. Their takes are a little bit longer. Their shots are a little bit longer. And again, it's you have to change the definition of the word fit. When we talk about fitting something in the frame, it's a totally different ball game at this point. And so you got to wrap your head around that difference. Okay, so again, here's what we're talking about. One sensor, same dilemma. You're shooting 9 by 16, you're shooting 1 by 1, and you're shooting 16 by 9. The Sony FX6 gives you some in the viewfinder and menu how to adjust this, and let me show you how to do that. So you have a couple different choices when you're setting up the FX6. You can do a user box and you can do a custom aspect ratio, but I'll show you what I have turned on here right now. So this is it. Okay. Now if I turn on the rule of thirds grid here, this is what the rule of thirds grid looks like. Let me blindly touch it. That's the marker on and off. If I go into my main menu now, and I go down to guide frame and I turn my guide frame on, which is what Sony calls the rule of thirds grid, you can see how crowded that gets. There's a lot of stuff going on in there, right? And so let me lock this down. Like it's moving on me. So I usually when I'm shooting 9 by 16 or 16 by or 1 by 1, I usually turn off my rule of thirds grid. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to turn this off so you can see it. And so you can do that. Now you can go in here in the menu and you can actually set a aspect marker. Or let's go back up here and you can go safety zone, aspect select. So you can go in and select aspect select. What you're going to notice in here that is there's no 9 by 16. There's 1 by 1, there's 3 by 3, and you'll see the things change 14 by 9, 15 by 9, 16 by 9, 17 by 9, 166 to 1, 1851, which is US theatrical aspect ratio, 2.351, which is anamorphic, and 2369, which is another form of widescreen, and then custom. Okay, so you can go into custom then, and you can set a custom aspect ratio. It's 9001600. That's what you do. And if I turn on the custom, it will give me a custom 9 by 16 marker in my viewfinder. But that's not what I did. Okay, so I didn't do that. What I did was I turned on the 1 by 1. So let's go back up here and say aspect area. Where'd it go? Aspect select custom. I went in and I turned on the 1 by 1. So now I got the 1 by 1 in there. Okay, that's it. And then what I did is I went down, I turned my guide frame off, and I went to my user box and I created a custom user box. And you can create this user box for both 9 by 16 and for 4 by 5. If you're doing Instagram feeds, you can go in here and change that. And I have that information in the documents that I'm sending to you. So this is what you change your user width to 152, and you change your user box height to 269. And if you go down, you want the vertical and horizontal to be at 0. Okay, the user positions to be at 0. And when you do that and you get out of that, now you see the 1 by 1 here and here, and the 9 by 16 here. And then the whole frame is 16 by 9. So you have all three of them right there in one, right? So it makes it really easy to frame when you're framing and you're looking at your shot. So it's pretty easy to set up. And so we give you the guidelines here. And again, this is all coming to you guys. So you'll have this as a visual ebook. And let's see here. Again, this is what we were talking about: 152 by 269 horizontal and vertical positions at 0. You can also go in and set the custom aspect ratio to 9001600, and it will also put that up in there. And you can do a line in or a mask. Okay, I find the mask is a little too much, but if you're wanting to switch back and forth, for example, you can set this up so you can look at it. If you're, have your menus set up. The nice thing about the FX6 is if you set up your menu, and I go in here and I go here and I go up here to mask or line, I've got it on line right now. And if I go mask, it shows me what the mask looks like. And so if I click on that and get out of my menu now, I'm looking at the mask. Okay, and the nice thing, and so it's easy to see that right now. But the nice thing about the FX6 is if I go right back in here, it takes me right back to where I was. Then I can click back on line again and get out of that and look at the line easy. So it's easy to operate that way. It's a personal preference which one you want to use, line or mask. Also depends on whether a client's looking at your monitor or not. Again, you can make thin borders or you can make darkened edges. It really doesn't matter. You can't change the thickness of the lines, but you can change the darkness of the mask on there. Again, this is what we're talking about the Instagram when you're doing Instagram feed. it crops you to 4:5. So if you're framing a 9:16 and you're sending it up on an Instagram feed, this is what it's going to look like. So you got to be really careful on that. So that is it. Okay. Again, the whole key to this is that you're, shooting once and you're trying to deliver as much as you can. Any questions? Let me stop sharing.
We'll wait to see if there's any questions. You did mention about clients and the micro dramas, and you said this is changing the scenario. Are you seeing that this is going to change a lot of things for writers, having to think about the cliffhanger after so many pages, the
It
writing,
does.
where
Yeah.
the how many actors they be using?
It's a totally different way of writing. Okay. So you're a writer, Mike, and so
That's why I'm asking.
you're used to writing for a 3 act um, you know, uh feature film, and you have the climax and each act is set up to have
Yeah.
its own
Or the
specific
5-act television,
or the
prologue and
5 act
epilogue.
element or Forrest Gump, which is, totally different.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Yeah.
yeah. And so you're used to that. Now you're dealing with 60 to 90-second things that have that entire creative arc happening in 60 to 90 seconds, plus a cliffhanger at the end to get people to come back again. So and that's how they get you. You watch 10 of those and you go, wow, this is and you will see lots of videos online of people going, I just don't get this. And they watch about, half a dozen of these and they're like, well, this is actually pretty good. I'm gonna continue watching this. And then
So
they spend
let me
10.
ask you this then. So script is 1 page per minute. So what you're basically saying is a writer has to actually think about a cliffhanger every page and a half.
Sure, but it's more than that. Okay. These are, again, think about this. They're shooting a feature's worth of material in
Right.
about a little over a week. Okay.
Right.
So that means that you have to be thinking about limited locations, limited number of people in the locations, not a lot of special effects and stuff. So it needs to be very easy shooting. They're shooting, what did he say, 100 pages a day? A
Yeah.
100 pages a day. I've shot television shows where we shot 40 or 50 pages a day, and that was a grind. Okay,
Yeah.
that was a grind. I have not shooting 100 pages a day. It's again, a part of it is having a small crew where you can move efficiently, fast and efficiently. And part of it is having the right people who know how to write for that. And then, you're not spending a lot of time and effort, doing multiple takes. So it changes the whole ecosystem from pre-production all the way through post-production, and everybody's got to kind of be on board.
The reason I'm asking about that is because there's the standard idea that's been taught here at Full Sail, and I learned it long before, and I heard other writing trucks talk about it, that if you have one good page a day, you could have a feature script in 90 days. So literally, it almost sounds like if you have one good segment for each page, you have your feature script.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think we should do a follow up with Terrell, who's the director who did the pilot here on 9:16, and get her in and talk to her about what her experience was like.
Right.
Was
I
this
figured this was going to wind up being a trilogy.
Yeah, this was the first time she'd ever shot a vertical video, so it'd be pretty interesting. Chris is talking about how Condor Blue just came out with a MagSafe, and so I have those. I use all kinds of stuff. The problem with the MagSafe one, and I have stuff that if you've never seen this, anybody know what this is? Okay, this is a SD card storage. You can put an SD card in here. You can plug this into your bottom of your phone, and it's like having a hard drive. So you can put a 128 gig SD card in here and record directly from your phone to this. And this mounts into the MagSafe port. And then this is another MagSafe holder that I use primarily as a monitor. Put this in the cold shoe or the hot shoe, and I'll put my MagSafe on here, and I'll have my phone. The other thing that a lot of people are using on these is that they have remote iPhone monitors that you can buy for like $69. It comes with a remote, so you can start and stop the iPhone and stuff like that. Um, and then the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is that there are all kinds. This is called a cheese plate, and this is a top plate. This is known as a cheese plate, but it's a top plate, and there's all kinds of these, and you could buy these pretty cheap. And they're for specific cameras. This one's for my old FX, 700, I think is what it was for. But they make them for FX sixes, any camera that you have. I have one on my FS2. This is my FS2 with a cage on it. You can see the cage and the top mount and the extended handle and stuff on this. So yeah, on this one, I mount the condor or the spider crab arm on here, and I bring it out, and I have my cell phone right here. So when I'm shooting, my cell phone is actually mounted right here next to it. And then I have on the top here, I have a little remote monitor for my cell phone that I can look at the monitor, and I can start and stop the cell phone without having to touch it and do all kinds of stuff. So it makes it much easier to go with. I shoot all kinds of stuff. I have a camera snap back there, which is an 8 millimeter digital camera that shoots a 9 by 16, but it does like really grainy, that grainy style look. It's kind of an old retro thing. So I use a lot of different things when I shoot. I worked on the first series that the guys did after they did Blair Witch. Was a thing called um, what was the In Search of the old Leonard Nimoy series. And so they brought me on because they wanted to shoot multiple format. They wanted to shoot Super 8 and 16 and high 8 video and digibeta and stuff. So we would have like rows of cameras lined up shooting the same thing, and then they would intercut those together to give it a different feel and look. Never really worked, but it was an interesting concept.
So I do want to address one thing that got brought up on permits and shooting. Yes, it's just because the camera is small and vertical does not mean you don't need to still follow the protocols of on a location, getting permits, shooting, especially if you have a crew. And there is still the whole idea of talent releases and everything, which is one of the fun things that gets taught in the in Portfolio 2 and Fundamentals of Production 1.
Okay. So I just uploaded that entire slide deck for you. We call them visual ebooks, and it's like a 82-page visual ebook, I think, 84-page visual ebook. So
For
you have
those watching the
that.
recording, it will be available. I got to double check how it would be put on DCBS, wearedcbs.com. But for those in the chat right now, you can download it. Don't worry, we'll leave the chat open for a little while past the meeting to be able to download it on here. So I just want to let everybody know how to get it.
Yeah. So just a question. Has anybody shot 9 by 16 yet?
I mean, no, I've only shot 9 by 16 on my phone, usually like for
Yeah.
social media purposes. That's about it. But
Yep.
not on the camera.
Yep. It seems like everything I shoot now is 16 by 9 and 9 by 16. Everything. It's like crazy how it's happened over the last year. It used to be a smattering of like high-end clients would ask for that, but now every client I work for wants it. Take it. Somebody.
But I'm glad to see that you sold me all these other resolutions, like 1 by 1, 2 by 3, 4 by 5, because I see that a lot now. Like now I see the purposes for it that you
Sure.
explained it today.
Yeah,
So
well, again, if you look at that the Word document I sent out on the aspect ratios, even I was a little surprised when I was putting that together, how many different aspect ratios and how many different things. Like if you went to Instagram, you can post like 5 or 6 different ways on Instagram, and each of those has its own aspect ratio. I had no idea about that. That was kind of an eye opener for me. So you have to get into that a little bit more. And again, I have friends that are, they're trying to make a living being a content creator. We have a good friend whose daughter is a content creator in Manhattan, and she's making a couple million a year. She's a fashionista, and her posts are more about here's all the clothes I got today, and there's a pile of boxes on her bed, or here's the party I went to and the dress that I wore, and that's it. So but she has a whole crew of people. She has 4 people that go out with her and shoot. So it's not like it's just her out there with her cell phone shooting, selfies. So you just have to realize that it's not what a lot of people think. And so as beginning filmmakers, especially if you want to do, short films, you need to be, as you're going through this. And here's what I tell my students all the time. You need to be doing two projects on your own a month outside of the class. No matter, even if you have a cell phone or you have the FX6, you need to be doing two short projects. And these are projects that you should be able to make sure they're short projects. Make sure you can write them in half a day, edit them in half a day, and shoot in half a day. If you do that, you can do that. If you don't know about the 48-hour film festival, it's a international film festival where you have 48 hours. You meet, they give you a bag with a prop in it and a line of dialogue and a genre. You don't know what any of that stuff is. Okay. And so you have 40 hours to create that. The cool thing about that is if you go to their website and look at their the tips and tricks that they give their filmmakers, this is what it's all about. Limited number of talent, limited number of locations, don't have a lot of special effects and stuff. Make them things you can easily, it's all more about dialogue and drama and action and stuff. And so the key is if you want to do, a short series like this, you can easily do 60 to 90 seconds in a half a day, of shooting. It's a dialogue. It's really dialogue, but you got to write it right. And so in 4 months, you got, four, 16 different little 60 to 90 minute, your beginning of your drama. And so the other thing we did talk about in the dramas is that they do multiple stories. Okay. So they'll do three or four of one storyline, then they'll jump up to another storyline, and then they'll go back to that first storyline. They might jump to a third storyline, and then they'll try to tie together two of the storylines together in 3 or 4 episodes. So it's really kind of interesting when you watch how they do it. They've got it kind of figured out already. And they've been doing it since 2020 in China. So, but there's a lot of micro dramas being produced here in the United States right now, and the money is just phenomenal, you know. And so as a young filmmaker, this is the opportunity that everybody's, how can I make money doing short films? This is it. This is it. This is the new frontier.
Okay, most people are commenting on the fact they have not yet. One has said that they have with an A7 IV on here. Someone's jumping on. Shay is saying, think I'll start practicing shooting with the hybrid approach now on there. So I think we've achieved our goal for part two on
Cool.
here.
Yeah. Only an hour and a half. That's not bad.
Yeah,
I
I
thought it was
scheduled this to 8:30 knowing it would go
yeah,
longer than an hour.
great. I'm very happy. Cool. Well, thanks for
So
everybody coming out. We appreciate you guys coming out.
So I get to do the plugs for the next two. We have this last month I did on repurposing vertical video and repurposing 16 by 9 to 9 by 16, 1 by 1. So go ahead and take a look at that when you're done because there were a couple things that Professor Baker has talked about in here that were referenced in there as well. So put the two together because I can see, and I've seen Professor Rout throwing a couple comments to me. I can see us doing a part three trilogy where we actually demonstrate some of the some of these techniques on. I don't know. It seems like it might be a good live from the hive, guys.
If we only knew a writer,
Could be.
Oh, I don't know. Where can we find this?
I think I just volunteered you, Mike.
I think so.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm listening to all this, and it's amazing
Welcome,
content.
Professor
But
Rout.
thank God, audio is audio until Randy brings in his boom pole contraption.
We're not going to go there.
I have an
30.
XLR version. I have an XLR version of that for like professional cameras too. Yeah.
I was going to raise my hand about going back to the concept of visual storytelling, but I mean, if I could just make one comment to the students, visual storytelling is really what it's all about. This is all amazing stuff. There's a lot of technical and logistical stuff that Randy covered that is just amazing. But, don't forget the power of 16 by 9, okay, in favor of 9 by 16. because there's so much you have to understand about all of the information we see in a 16:9 frame versus what we see in 9:16. And it does change the way you perceive a drama, and just kind of think about that just and Randy beautifully talked about there are some things you just can't shoot,
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to take
that
away
just
from everybody with this
won't
is
translate from 16:9 to 9:16, and it does affect how the viewer is going to feel about the story. But that's something that I was talking about, Mike, to do as another episode, is how we write, and the difference between, the commercial stuff we do, versus, the narrative stuff. I think would be a great topic.
I think one of the great things that came out of this, and Randy, this was really great. I know everyone loved it on here. I think what the best thing that came out of here is we need to lose the verses. It needs to be 16:9 and 9:16 and 1:1. It's not so much it's a versus, it's understanding when it's needed and when it's properly done, and when you should basically think about, is this appropriate for the client, the project, the shoot, what's going on with everything on that one. So I
Or
can
the
see us doing
story.
something with that. It's all about story.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it makes me reconsider 9:16. I'll say that.
On that note, because it is after 8:30, we do have to wrap this up because we could go on forever on here. Professor Baker, would you like to give any last little outro?
I can't wait to see the first person who shoots an anamorphic 9:16.
That's it. Check, please. I'm out. I know it's possible.
Yeah, who knows? The cool thing about all this is the beginning of this, guys. So there, like I said, you're going to see it jump the vertical markets. You're going to see comedy, you're going to see kids programming, you're going to see game shows, you're think about anything that you see on television or film right now, you're going to see jump over to the vertical kind of arena over the next. So, think about that. Get on top of that, get in front of that, become an innovator. So this again is very rare. We got two things going on right now, AI and this happening at the same time in our industry, along with some technology updates like, Open Gate and stuff, which is very unique. You never see like this kind of a thing happen in our industry all at once. So this is it's an incredible time for you guys to be getting this degree. I just can't stress that enough to you. This is the time to become a visual storyteller. No better time than now.
All right. On that note, thank you, Professor Rout, for your thoughts on this also. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's okay.
My headphones went a little wonky on that.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for coming out, guys.
All right. I'm going to
Thank
end the
you, guys.
recording first before we exit the meeting. So I'm going to stop the recording.